Welcome, guys. This episode, I would like to talk about quite a few different topics. I'll start it off with the July 2 free agents, and then I would like to move to the playoff races and some of the stuff and the headlights going into the trade deadline, and then also talk about some of the top systems in the league. I got a little sneak preview of the episode I'll make later. The Colorado GM did a really good job um, with a fun little experiment for all you guys to kind of rank your top systems. And some of the rankings are still going on, but it's clear at this point with some of the data in who everyone kind of thinks are the top 3 or 5 systems. So we'll kind of give a sneak preview of that, and then we'll have a lot more to come in the main episode with that, with all the data. But I'll probably kind of glance over those top 2 or 3 systems to show how ridiculous they are. And then in that episode, we'll talk more about the teams and the rankings and kind of go more in depth on that. But this episode here, I'd like to talk about the international free agents, and we'll go over the guys that signed. This was one of the best, if not the best, July second class I've ever seen. Good year to have $5 million extra. This class is loaded with high-end guys. Very raw, as always, at that age when you're taking them. Mostly 16 guys, year olds, they're just kind of really volatile. So obviously a lot of these guys can be big busts and not be worth it. But with how many ridiculously high-end guys are in this class, you'd expect a few of them to turn out. And whoever turns out of these top 8 or 10 guys with how high their ceilings are looks to be just in that uber top tier talent level and perennial all-star type. So we'll kind of glance over them and see who's signed already. So first signing here I got in the list is Caesar Fantini. 80-80, my scout says on his bat. Crazy, crazy power right fielder. Really similar, if you look at it, to Tony Guerra here. Tony Guerra is an 80, 65, 70 with a big avoid K and pretty solid defense, 55, 65. And a very similar profile here. Just main difference is not quite the avoid K it looks like on Fantini, but everything else is very similar. Not quite the defense, but everything else, the power and contact. Actually, a little bit more power potential at this age than Guerra. Obviously, Guerra, you might not get to 80, but obviously it's really, really, really far away. But just to give you a preview of what the scout kind of pegs him at, is that kind of tie-in talent as one of the best hitters in the league. So pretty ridiculous profile there. Second up on this list, we have Leon Diaz. Leon Diaz is a ridiculous, ridiculous power bat also. The 75, 70, 75 across the 3 main bat tools, that kind of like an exit velocity type thing. I always figure if you take the gap power and the power. So the guy hits the snot out of the ball. The approach is pretty mediocre, which is fair if you have 75 power. The 40 avoid K is lots. There's like Gallo, all those guys, Adam Dunn, huge, huge power. Usually have the low avoid K, which makes sense. They're swinging real hard and reckless. They're not just trying to have a quick contact swing, so kind of makes sense. But there is just a little bit of risk there with the guy that has the 40 avoid K at that age, but he has everything else you look for. High work ethic, high intelligence, pretty good range, can play a legitimate left field or a ridiculously high end first base. Very rare that you get a power bat that has 70 infield range. Can't play at shortstop or second with a turn and the arm being so low. But at first base with 55 air and 70 range, it's probably the best ratings you could possibly get there. There's guys like Evan White that are probably as high as it gets there, like 60 range and 55 air types, and they usually win like 7, 8 gold gloves sometimes in these dynasties at first base because there's just so few first basemen that have over 50 range. So when you have 70 range, if you put this guy in first base, he would be crazy. But he can probably stick it out in left field when he's young and be a legitimate left fielder. And that gives you a crazy potential power bat out in the left field there if he turns out. But very raw, 18 years old, which is 2 years older than some of these other guys, but still only has a 20 contact, my scout says. So that guy is about as volatile as it gets, but the ceiling is just so ridiculous. You just want to love to dream on that. So that's a guy you just stash away and we'll look back on in 3-4 years and see if he's developing. Next up, we have Jose Lara. Lara is another guy that looks, again, just like his teammate Guerra, in the organizational teammate Guerra. Really safe, probably the safest out of all these young 16-year-old guys that signed, because he's a really good runner, so he should have solid bat pip. Not a ground ball pull guy. He's a line drive hitter and a spray fly ball guy, and he has really good athleticism, 6'5" speed, and has really high currents. The 30 current home run power and the 30 current avoid are extraordinarily high at 16, which is awesome. He could probably play right away in rookie ball. You probably don't want to rush a guy like that. You throw him in the complex for a year and let him simmer there, but The guy is as safe as it gets in this class, so a really interesting pick there. Goes to an organization that already has a ton of good corner bats, so again, no reason to rush him. So you'd probably just forget about this guy for 4 years. We'll see where he goes down the line, but the ceiling is very high in this guy, and the currents are really good. So a really good combination there. One of my favorite players in the class. Just another lefty hitter, just like his buddy Guerra there. So going to be really interesting to see. I'd imagine if I had to put money on, this guy would probably turn out the fastest, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him in 8-ball as a teenager. So we'll see if he debuts next year at 17, but or waits till he's 18. But just a ridiculous talent there. Love that one too. I think next up we have Eastick. Charlie Eastick. Oh my god, this scout just is obsessed with this guy. 80-80 again. This class is just unfair. So this guy is probably a left fielder. Could probably play some right field with a 60 arm. Also has really good work ethic and adaptability, which is really good to see. The only weakness on him is the low athleticism, but as a bat, man, holy smokes, that makes up for everything fivefold. The guy has 80 power with 30 current, which is unbelievable. That's some Hall of Fame level talent with the power bat right there. If he can get anywhere close to that potential, even if he gets to 65, guy that can play the corner outfield 65 with that high contact, he would just be incredible. This guy is from Australia, which is really neat, Melbourne. Huge contact and power potential. Again, this guy's very raw, like pretty much every 16-year-old, but we'll see if he lives up to it. You gotta love when a guy has 80-80 and high work ethic, one of the best combinations you could possibly have. So just an amazing ceiling on him too. And yet another 80 contact guy. This is just crazy. My scout might just be taking Molly or something, but he just loves all these dudes. This guy is a legitimate third base prospect. This is who I offer the $5 million to, and missed out on my division rival getting him, the Chicago Cubs. Unfortunately for me, 6'4", 65 arm, 50 range, really solid average third base potential defense. Which, when you have that good of a bat, is a really good combination. Premium defensive position that can play the position for sure. Fly ball hitter, 80 contact, 60 power, 60 gap, 65 avoid, which is real nice from a guy that has really high exit velocity with the gap and the home run power being high. Only thing he's waiting on is the eye. So again, he's probably such a star talent. He's really young. He just turned 16. So he might actually not even debut next year and have to wait till he's 18. But he probably could debut next year if he wanted. Like all these guys are so talented, they could probably all play at 17. But again, you don't want to rush these guys sometimes when they're super raw. But it's a tough decision to make. But we'll see how many guys play next year. But a guy that probably will play for sure next year is Estrada. He's 2 years older than some of these guys, or all these guys so far, but Estrada is a legitimate middle of the field talent. This guy is the first legit center fielder. 70 range, 75 base running, supreme athleticism, high intelligence, huge gap power. So that's a really good combo when you have high gap power and high line drive, just because going to hit a ridiculous amount of triples and doubles if he turns out. 30 current also, which is really good. The 25 currents in the contact and home run aren't too shabby either. At least they're not 20s, right? Another guy, we're just waiting on his patience there, but really talented middle of the field guy. If you compare him to the center fielders in this draft, he's so much better than them. It's pretty weak center field class. I was comparing him because he's 18, and the guys, high school guys in the next draft are like 18. So it's interesting to compare how good these international guys' ceilings are compared to the draft guys. So if you look at the top draft guys, I actually will go to that draft class, and if you look at it, you'll just see center fielders. I think the top guy on my board is. These guys aren't really. The first legit center fielder is down here. Oh, shoot, where'd he go? I think it's Azar or something. Agron. Agron's like probably my top center fielder in the draft. Huge range, huge athleticism, but 55 power and 50 contact. And if you look at this guy here, back to the international guys. If you look at Estrada, 60 and 55, but way higher gap power and also with similar athleticism. So it definitely would be a surefire top 25 pick. Just an awesome talent. Next up, we have Adames. This guy, 75 power. Also, another guy that's just has that Chris Burns type profile. If you look at Chris Burns here, Chris Burns on the Phillies has 75 power, about 55 gap, 70 eye. And if you look at this guy, pretty similar, not quite the eye of Burns, but the power, man, is 75. You just You just got to love that. Probably a first baseman. Could probably play left field too, but probably be a solid first baseman at 35 infield range. That 6'6" could probably be a pretty average defender there with his huge bat, kind of the prototypical 6'6" big body first baseman. But we'll see if his range can develop. If we can get to 45 or 50, we should be able to hang out there. He has a pretty solid arm for a young guy, so really interesting prospect there too. Another division rival there for me going to the Mets, and then another division rival here going to Atlanta. We have Barraza, who looks a lot like some of the other guys on the list, almost exactly like that E-stick guy and some of those corner bats that we went over the first couple picks there. Crazy, crazy, crazy contact home run power combination. Doesn't quite have the avoid K as some of these other guys, but with that much power and contact, it's probably okay. Wouldn't surprise me if it goes up to 40. A lot of those young guys with really high contact, there's not usually a big discrepancy between the contact and avoid. So it's pretty rare to have a 35-70. So it makes me think that the avoid K probably is a lot better than that to have that much contact. But we'll see. Again, these young guys can change so much. But pretty good athlete, which is a good sign. And a legitimate left fielder, 45 range, 55 arms, a pretty solid combination. So it can probably stick out there, and maybe even right field if he gets a little more arm. Guys are really, really another talented big body lefty, and also really high level first baseman. Probably be like a 60 or almost maybe even a 65 first base defender with 45 range and 40 air is a really good combination there at first base. So another really really talented big body dude. There's a couple of those guys I just talked about were 6'6" with big power bats. So really, really, really impressive class. Amazing ceilings on these guys. So it's just I think it's going to make me sad in a couple of years thinking I missed out on this guy, because it wouldn't surprise me to see this guy kicking my butt for years in the NL. Kind of looks like that whole big body Chris Bryant third base profile with the big power bat. Really, really impressive dude. So next up we have some of these races for the playoffs here kind of coming to a head here when it comes to trade deadline discussion. There's a couple teams that are kind of head and shoulders above everybody right now, and then we kind of have those middle tier teams. Detroit's fighting back here. They won a couple big ones in a row to stay in the race. This AL kind of has these three teams right here fighting hard for this last playoff spot. Boston at 49 wins, Minnesota at 50. So that's kind of the last two playoff spots. And then you have Arizona at 45 and Detroit at 42. So Detroit is about 7 games back of that last spot, but they still well alive. Their pitching's kind of underperforming right now, so I wouldn't be surprised if they could bounce back and have a little bit better pitching in the second half. And then you have Arizona there. They just lost 4 in a row, which kind of hurt their chances. They were pretty equal with Boston and Minnesota there. Fell off a little bit in the last few sims, but still right in the thick of it there. Really, really talented squad. I was reviewing them before. Minnesota hanging on there as a 58 win percentage team is really impressive. But yeah, and you have Washington at 38 wins, not completely out of it yet, but starting to fall back a little bit. In the NL, this is really interesting. The really talented San Francisco Giants roster has had some bad injury luck the last couple of years and underperformed a little bit. Pretty close to a 100-win team talent-wise when healthy, but missed a lot of games out of Drew Jones, who's an amazing player, the last 2 years. Pretty much like an MVP candidate there, 4 WAR, 5 WAR, 7 WAR, 4 WAR, and then just missed a ton of games here. He is a big loss there. And then they also have McLean had the career ender. He was having a really good season there, 9 starts. He was at a 3.6 FIP, and so that has kind of made them underperform a little bit. They're at 45 wins, which is the last playoff spot right now, tied with Chicago Cubs at 45, and then we have Tampa fighting there at 42. Me and the Marlins at 41, and then you have Seattle at 43. So there's a lot of teams in this league. If you look at the standings here, I'm only 4 back, and look how many spots back I am. So really tight race for those last couple wildcard spots over here. San Francisco, it's a pretty little scary roster. They're quite a bit more talented, in my opinion, than these other teams. Chicago is a real nice roster, too, in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's had a lot of injury troubles, too. Guerrero and Franco have both been out a lot this year, which is really brutal as their top 2 players. So we'll see if they can kind of go back to their winning ways in the second half of the season. That stuck at a 500 record here with quite a bit better roster than these other teams like me in Seattle and Miami. No offense to anybody, but I just think that Tampa and San Francisco rosters are pretty loaded with superstars. and some really good depth in pitching. So we'll see how that kind of goes. Last of all, in this video, I wanted to talk about the top systems. Again, like I said earlier, the Colorado guy put together a really cool template to kind of talk about the best prospects and the best systems so far. So I've kind of got a sneak preview and know what I voted. So I kind of want to talk about the top 2 or 3 systems. And then, like I said, when that video, I'll do the official video for that, will be a lot more in depth and talk about all 32 systems, kind of show the rankings and stuff. But for this episode, I just want to start to give a little bit of preview on the top 2 or 3 systems that I think are kind of head and shoulders above some of those other teams that have a lot of prospects. So we'll start here with the New York Mets, who I think definitely have a top 3 system. Almost definitely almost one of the better ones you'll see with talent here. There's some ridiculous guys at the top here, led by the #1 OSA prospect in the league, Serratos. So we'll start with him. Serratos is a monster. He actually just started in Rookie League this year. 13 starts so far, already hitting 472 on base percentage, already showing his power a little bit there with a home run, and he is on pace for 2.5 WAR in 63 games. Obviously a small sample size, but 177 WRC plus, showing that he more than belongs in pro baseball. We'll see here. It looks like he's playing a little bit of second and shortstop. I think his ultimate position will probably be third, but he's kind of a tweener between second and third, and I think he has the bat. If worse comes to worse and he loses some range as he gets older, he could always still be a really high level first baseman because he has so much bat. But for right now, looks like he has kind of a future at a few different spots. So we'll keep an eye on where he can play. So that's kind of the crown jewel of the system. Then they just signed Adames, who actually comes out at #2 on this list. We already talked about him early in this episode. So you got 2 guys at the top that have 80 and 75 power, which is a pretty good start there. Next up, we have Pete McDonald. Pete McDonald is an awesome 2-way player, one of the cooler prospects I've seen in a while. The guy is a really legitimate center fielder, probably a little more ceiling, in my opinion, at center field. A really solid pitcher, like a 3-pitch guy, but 2 of them are only 25s at 20 years old. The sinker's real solid and developed, but not quite as developed as a pitcher. Does have that really good movement, and definitely, if he was a pitcher only, it'd still be a real solid prospect. But I really like him as a center fielder. Center fielder, he has a real plus bat for the average center fielder, 55, 50, 50, 65 potentials. He hasn't hit great in rookie ball so far. He's only been a 76 and 83 WRC plus player for the 2 years, but it's still really early. That's just about 300 plate appearances, which is just a half season in the major league level. This guy has really high currents for a 20-year-old, 35 and 40 and 35s across the board pretty much, except for his eye are real solid. Super rangy out there in center field, plays a real solid center field, and just an awesome talent there. So that's a real cool guy they have. So 3 real nice position players there. A couple more position players here. As you see, their top 6 are all listed as position players. Another international guy. So now they have 3 ridiculous bats at the top there. You got 80-80 for the contact and gap. This guy is extraordinarily raw. It's just kind of almost exactly like that other scouting discovery they just signed, Adames, except this guy has a bit more contact and a little bit less power. A huge arm, a real solid right fielder. Already has a 35 right field rating, which is really cool to see. So should be able to perform really well in rookie right when he comes up, as most rookies at that age only have a 20 to 25 or maybe even a 30 rating, but real solid there. The complex, I guess he's learned a little bit of defense or something. Really cool to see. Andy Hill is 4th on this list. He was the 2nd pick of the draft last year, and he's crushing rookie ball this year, which is good to see. Last year in rookie, he hit 269 with 15 bombs, 144 WRC plus, and then he got promoted to the Appalachian League, the high-level rookie, and he struggled a little bit in a short sample size there. And then this year he comes back and repeats at that level, which I like to see. So you get 1 year lower rookie and then 1 year in high rookie, and he's all absolutely killing it this year so far. So the strikeout rate's way down. The ISO is high again, over 1,000 OPS, and he's running the bases real well. Real athletic for a big first baseman type. He is 0 errors so far on defense too. So just a really crazy collection of corner bats they have there. And Hill having like the 75 contact, 75 power, and then you got Arano with the 80 contact, and then Adames with the 75 power, and then Serratos with the 80-80. So just a crazy collection of hitters here. And then next up you have Danny Colon, which is another scouting discovery, another corner outfield bat. This guy could almost play third base. The error is just a bit low, but he probably it fits perfectly as a right fielder. Guy has 75 contact and 60 power. Almost, I think that's the exact same combination that the Serrano guy had, 80 and 55. So another, just another ridiculous high ceiling contact gap power type, high adaptability, just a crazy. All these guys are teenagers too, except for McDonald there, who's just turned 20. So very young at the top, but very high ceiling. Finally, we got a pitcher here, Omar Balby. Balby at 50, 50, 65. Two really good pitches, one kind of less developed. And then you get a couple other pitchers here. I don't want to spend all day on the system. I'll just show you one or two more and then we'll move on. This guy looks like a real talented dude, too. This guy, oh my God, I just realized he came from Baltimore before I joined this league. I had no idea what that was for Brandon White, who ended up retiring. But yeah, this guy looks like he's just got a ton of movement since that trade, and his control's gone up a crazy amount since that trade. So, real nice pickup for them. And then a ton of other talent. If you look down here, they got 31 guys in the top 500 on this list. Real good class. Oscar Rivera, I always liked quite a bit in the draft there. Real crazy to have your like top 10 pick be number 20th on your list. That just shows how deep they are. Quintana is one of the better prospects in the league too, 65 contact, 55 power. So anyways, you can obviously see this Mets system is just beyond loaded. Another team at the top is the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox don't quite have as much depth, but they are also in the same boat with having a ton of high-end position player talent. A little more developed too. So again, not quite as much the Mets. The Mets have a crazy gold mine of players, but these Chicago guys are real good and real developed. So Blankenship, the developed college hitter, looks like a monster. He is. The OSA loves his range and arm. Wow. So my scout says he's just obviously. I think we've all looked at him. A real good player across the board. Already has 5 home runs in 18 games so far in his rookie debut in A-ball. There, really. Really talented dude. Gone over him lots. It looks like a potential ace here in Rob Shepard. Best college arm in the draft a year ago. Cincinnati traded him, and he looks like he's developing very nicely. He's come a long way since the draft. He's up in everything pretty much since last year's draft. He went up in stuff, and he went up in movement and movement potential. His control's gone up, and he's performing pretty solid there with a 3.3 FIP. So he looks like a stud. And then you got Pat Carlson, who looks like a huge bat. Carlson's debuted pretty nicely here with a 124 WRC plus. Looks like he can play a corner outfield spot or DH at a really high level. Looks like an awesome player. And then they got, I don't know why this guy's so high. My scout doesn't like him too much. And then a couple nice arms here. This guy has some major stuff from a lefty. Looks like a fireball thrower there. And then you have Mike Dorn, another really high level outfielder. He was one of the better power bats in the draft last year as a high school guy. 80 arm, 65 power is a real nice combination there. So he's another guy kind of chilling down there in the minors. They just traded for the 4th overall pick of the draft last year, Josh Benson. So they have Dorn, who was like a top 10 pick, and then they traded for another top 10 pick from the same draft, Benson. So 2 big booming top 10 pick bats. And then you got Sergio Lucio, who is a little bit low on this list. I think personally I have him quite a bit higher. I think he's a little better bat than Benson for sure. The OSA doesn't quite agree with me, but he's got the really, really nice ratings. He had 19 home runs in rookie ball last year and hit 311 as an 18-year-old. Hugely advanced base running and gap power. Really high current gap power, contact, and avoid K. Really solid first base defender, and he's 6'7". Kind of has everything you look for. One of the best first base prospects in all of baseball. Kind of starting off a little slow in A-ball this year with 0 home runs and 106 plate appearances, but love his ratings if those are legitimate. Another good first base bat down here. So this guy just has a ton of position player talent. And then we don't really have time to go over everybody, but just kind of highlighting the top guys there. I really like Chris Pugh too. Another guy, late first rounder last year in the compensation supplemental picks. Real good group of talent they got here for the White Sox. And then the other top system, we'll talk about Arizona has a real good system. I have a pretty deep system. I don't quite have the top end talent of these teams. I have quite a bit of depth on my system. Boston also has a really good system. Boston has a guy that's really highly rated by the OSA, Orta here. Really nice 4-pitch mix. Ton of blue across that profile with the stamina and the hole being really high. 99 velo, huge stuff, huge control, just everything you look for, really advanced. Galarza here is a beast. He's a fringe third baseman. He could probably play with that huge arm. He could definitely play the position. The 40 range isn't ideal, but the massive arm kind of makes up for it. So he could definitely play there or be a really high level first baseman. He is really young at 21 years old and already holding his own in AAA this year. Jumped up, only played a couple games in AA. It's just so advanced. I guess they wanted to skip him there. Had a really good season last year in High A, which he had also jumped all the way from rookie to High A. So a really interesting career path. That's just kind of the new GM taking over. The old GM probably wasn't managing him quite as good or something, but interesting career path. But he's when he's that talented, he's made the most of it. And then you have a couple arms right up here. Really high level center fielders here. As you look, they're only 17. Pretty much clones of each other. Both guys just crazy, huge range, 65 range, high work ethic, 70 eyes, 70 contact. And then you have another guy that fits the exact same profile, 70 contact, crazy home run power with 65 range. So some of the toolsiest guys look like some of those $5 million international guys. These guys were scouting discoveries, which is crazy. I think both of them were, which is nuts. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, which one of those guys develops better. Obviously, you're probably going to think the guy with the 70 power over the 40 power, but both those guys are really good in their different ways. Raul Nava, really special talent. He literally had a 0 rating at second base, like recently when I looked. He had just had a center field rating, and he just jumped up to a 70, 80 already, which shows his ridiculous ceiling in the infield. Love him. Alex Dominguez, one of my favorite prospects in the draft this year. Really high level two-way player as a catcher and pitcher. And then they have tons of guys. Like, your system's deep when your number 24 player is this guy. Obviously, my scout's a lot higher in this guy than everybody else's probably. Crazy 75, 75 on him for some reason. I think my scout's seeing a little much, but who knows? Maybe he is that good. And then a bunch of arms here at the top, 24, 22, and 22 years old. So real old developed system, which is really good to see. A lot of guys that are pretty much major league ready. You got 25-year-old here, almost maxed out in his ratings. So really cool system there. Next up, we have, I'm trying to think the other top systems here. Seattle is a pretty good system. Tampa Bay has a lot of depth. You got Toronto there. Let's look at I think Minnesota is the one other team I want to look at. That's right. Minnesota has a couple real high-end guys I really like here. So a guy that comes out really high in my rankings is Bizarra at second base. Fringy second baseman, could be a first baseman, but a monster bat. This guy was attempted to be traded for Zach Gallen twice already, but it might turn out to work out for the Twins in the long run, holding on to him. I know they're going for the playoffs now and kind of like a win now thing, but who knows? It's always tough to get rid of a guy like this. 70i, 60s across the board, crazy 80i from the OSA rankings. They have a 65 power also, just a crazy profile on him. So real high ceiling guy. Already has an 18% walk rate there early in his career, showing that I might be legitimate. Juan Vera, Juan Vera is a 65 ability catcher with huge bat. Really high level catching prospect that came over from the Jared Jones trade from the Yankees. 60 gap power, 55 home run power. Starting off a little slow in his career, hasn't really hit well at any of the levels, which is a little cause for concern. But he's also a 19-year-old catcher, so some catchers friggin' don't develop till they're like 28 years old. So no rush on young teenage catchers, that's for sure. You just love to see the defense and good mentals. So I imagine as long as you are patient with him, he'll probably still develop, even though he's starting a little slow. And next up, you have Nick Talbot, one of the top prospects in the minor leagues. He is a ridiculously high-level infielder, 65 range, 80 arm. The guy debuted super young last year at 18 and held his own and had a 92 WRC plus. This year he's starting pretty slow, having a really cold start, but his ratings are just amazing. 75 contact, really developed, 35 current contact, 45 current, avoid K, and he has quite a bit of pop in his bat potentially for a young guy. He did have 5 home runs for a middle infielder in a 33 game, which is pretty nice. Huge gap power too. Walked a lot too, 11% last year, so has a lot of the stuff you look for in an elite prospect. Might be a legitimate shortstop if he could just get a little bit more defense. Obviously, the arm has just a rocket, and he has pretty good range. If he could just get up, you'd like to see at least a 55 and his turn double play in air to be able to play the middle of the field. But worst case scenario, I think he's a Gold Glove third baseman. which would take advantage of that rocket arm and range combination. Love that prospect. And then Amari Chalmers. Amari Chalmers was just drafted pretty high this season. Huge developed bat. One of the most developed guys you'll see in the draft from this year, last year combined. The guy went right to high A, and he's already producing a 137 WRC plus, kind of like a Brooks Lee from real life. Really solid. I think he's playing all over the field here. Looks like he's played a little shortstop, second base. Probably not a middle infielder in the long run. Those ratings are pretty bad already defensively. He already has 9 errors just in about 20 games, so probably has a home at first base or potentially left field, but you never know. He's only 20. He could improve his defense a little bit, but his bat is definitely good enough to play anywhere, even DH, so keep an eye on him. He might be a fast riser to the majors. And then another really high-level teenage bat, 60 contacts, 60 home run power, 11 home runs last year in rookie ball, which is really good. Really high WRC plus this year to start off at 320 on base percentage, and big arm at third base there. This guy is pretty impressive ceiling too. And then you have some nice arms here. TJ Banks, a 22-year-old high control guy. And then you have Palter there, real nice arm with a high movement there, like that, high intelligence and electric fastball. And then you got Juan Diaz here, real nice teenage arm with a high ceiling, scouting discovery with a huge fastball, big control. Looks like he's already playing there at 19 years old too, which is cool. He looks like he's a bit of a two-way guy, but not really, just playing there a little bit. But striking out 23% of the guys so far in 2 starts. Really low FIP, so like to see that out of him. Really nice class overall. So you got those 5 really good hitters in Vera, Barraza, Salazar, Chalmers, and Talbot, and then a couple decent arms. So that system doesn't quite have nearly as much depth as those other ones I showed you, but the high-end talent between Talbot and Barra being one of the best catchers, Talbot being one of the best infielders, Bazzara being one of the best bats. Some interesting high-level talent there from those guys. So that's all I'll show you guys for this episode in the video. I don't want to spend too much time talking about all the different systems. I'll kind of go over them more when we do the official video for the prospect rankings that everybody in the league that went along with that voted on. So I'll end that episode here, but I like talking about those July 2 guys. That was a pretty fun episode. Cheers, guys.